Aaron Torres is with us on the Lewis Automotive Hotline here in a Friday, a game day Friday for the NFL, and I know there's some college football games too. AT, how are you today? Got some interesting games, but maybe some better games last weekend. What stood out for you?
Oh, what did stand out to me, fellas? First of all, great to be with you. I think the thing that probably stood out was I think the thing that probably stood out the most as the guy who was on the Garrett Nussmeier isn't that good train. I don't know if Brian Kelly's the answer at LSU train. I think what stood out was that LSU probably looks like the best team in the country to me. So it's early, it's week one. Maybe we all overvalue Clemson, but as a guy who really had not been sold on Garrett Nussmeier, and I think really the entire LSU operation, that stood out to me. And one thing about me, guys, we've been doing this a long time. I'm never willing to admit when I was wrong. I'm never ashamed to admit when I was wrong. And I think I'm just going to have to take a big old L on the LSU Tigers. They looked really good on Saturday.
I still think both those teams are capable of making the playoff 12. I do want to ask you about the Florida State-Alabama game, and I don't want to overreact too much to week one. Is Florida State that good, or is Alabama, have they just fallen off?
Yeah, I'll say this. Certainly Arkansas fans are familiar with Gus Malzahn, his game, whatever. I thought Florida State just, with that Gus Malzahn offense, I said all week, I might have said it on your guys' show, I can't remember, is, I don't know that I'd want Gus Malzahn as my head coach in 2025 with everything that comes with that responsibility-wise. But have him as my play caller, yeah, I'll take that guy any day of the week. And so I thought they could keep it close. It's also worth noting the best interior defensive lineman for Alabama was out. So I thought this would be 28-20, 28-24 Alabama win. But, guys, the Alabama thing is fascinating. I don't want to undersell what Florida State did, but we also know the standard in Alabama. And I think the big thing is, guys, I don't know how much you guys get to talk to people from other SEC markets, but, the thing about Alabama was that coaching staff was, and the players too, were very publicly selling, hey, mistakes were made last year, but we learned from them, and things are going to be different this year. And I think the thing that stood out watching that game is things looked exactly the same, is that, the offense was inconsistent. You ran the ball well early and then abandoned it. Offensive line really didn't block in the manner that they needed to. You go on and on down the list. The defense looked out of position, looked confused, running quarterback. We all remember Diego Pavia last year. So, I've spent a lot of time talking to people kind of in Tuscaloosa this week. There's real frustration. Like, this isn't a fake internet thing. Like, there is real anger in that fan base right now because that staff and that group of players spent the last 8 months telling us how different it was going to be starting this year, and I don't care how good Gus Malzahn is as a play caller. They just look totally out of sorts and unprepared.
Well, it's a matter, I think, also of it's not that you look at something as a good loss. You can watch Notre Dame playing Miami and think, you know what,
sure,
that they actually look like they might be pretty good this year. Notre Dame.
Agreed.
I think if they play again in 8 weeks and it was up north, I think Notre Dame would get them. I think that the humidity being down south a little bit, I think that kind of jumped on their back.
Well, and nobody's questioning the effort. That's the thing that just and look, they weren't the only program either, Aaron. Watching Alabama and a couple of guys jogging after him here and there. I mean, there were a few other coaches too that were complaining about effort, which I always. Look, I didn't play football, but that always comes across to me as like, what is going on here? What are you doing if you're not giving effort?
If you count my 4 years of college and 4 years in the pros, I could put on one hand how many times you saw guys not give effort because it's not acceptable. Coaches will not, they will not tolerate that.
Well, and let me jump in on that. I'll defer to Matt on that because you're the ex-pro. But the other thing is, how about especially in week one? Like, it's one thing, okay, it's week 6. You got a weird, out-of-conference game against, whoever, Fresno State, and then next week Florida's coming to town. And so let's see where a guy would be looking ahead or maybe wouldn't be fully focused. But, guys, you only get 12 of these, and you're waiting 8 months. especially in Alabama. You're waiting 8 months to prove the world wrong, to tell them that what we saw last year wasn't the real Alabama. And then to your guys' point, just the effort, just the simple stuff. And like I said, guys, listen, how realistic is it to get rid of Kalen DeBoer with that buyout? It'll all be fine, by the way, if he goes to Georgia in a couple weeks and wins. But I will tell you, like I said, sometimes, like I'll give you an example, right? Is I think, like, the narratives about Hugh Freeze. You could like Hugh Freeze, you could not like Hugh Freeze. I'm here to tell you, I think nationally there was probably more talk of Freeze's job status than there was at Auburn. Like, I think it was kind of a made-up media story. And I just bring it up because at Alabama, that is not the case at all. That fan base, again, is very angry right now, not only at what they saw, but what they saw relative to what they saw last year and how nothing has really changed at all, at least through 1 week of the season.
Well, it's interesting to see these programs. You got to see this at Kentucky and see how it works for Kentucky basketball. Those supposed blue bloods, when the program is passed off from a legendary coach who has set a standard that feels really difficult to reach, and then it's handed off to somebody else. Look at Urban Meyer to Ryan Day. Now you have a coach who's reached that level. You could Michigan. It's a little different right now, though. It looks like maybe Sharon Moore might have a little something
that
there.
Quarterback they got right, that freshman quarterback.
It might be a couple years off, But in those situations too, like Kirby Smart at Georgia, they had experience in that league, real experience in that league as a coordinator. Kalen DeBoer did not have that, and it's not like he's coached an SEC game yet this year, but that just does not look like Alabama's supposed to look. You just never know when somebody, even with a great record at a previous two schools, goes somewhere else, and it can blow right up in their face. Hello, Billy Gillespie.
Well, and I'll say this, a couple follow-ups to that, because I'm hearing this a lot. First of all, I'm hearing this, which kind of annoys me, this whole, well, how can you expect to be anybody to be Nick Saban? Listen, I will defend Alabama fans. I don't think they expected Nick Saban 2.0. I think what they did expect is a guy that we saw in Washington, a guy that has his team disciplined, prepared. That was the one thing about Kalen DeBoer at Washington. You could never say that his team was unprepared. What were they, 3-0 against Dan Lanning in Oregon, 2-0 against Sark in Texas in the postseason. And I think that's where the frustration comes in, is that, as great as Nick Saban was, Nick Saban lost games, but it was never because his team was unprepared, not ready to go, confused, whatever. And I think that is really where the frustration is coming in. It's not just the wins and losses. It's the manner in which you're losing these games. It's how you look. It's the lack of preparation. And again, I'll defend their fans. I think it's actually largely justifiable, their frustration, not with just the results, but with how things are looking for that particular team.
All right, AT, before we get off here, and there's one other thing I wanted to hit on about Arkansas basketball, but
Sure.
Give me a game you want to pick for this weekend. What game stands out for tomorrow that's top of mind for you?
I mean, the Oklahoma-Michigan game. I mean, listen, It's the only top 25 matchup. I get it. Next week's going to be just bananas with A&M, Notre Dame, Florida, LSU, Georgia, Tennessee, etc. What stands out to me about that game is what I think is interesting is kind of in this world that we live in. Bryce Underwood, the NIL, darling, who basically in this world, you pay a quarterback that much. It's almost like the NFL. If you're the first pick in the NFL draft or the third pick or the fifth pick, it doesn't really matter if you're ready to go or not. You're playing, and that's kind of what I think we're seeing in college football. And I thought Bryce Underwood looked good, so I'm not saying he wasn't prepared to play, but I just bring it up because you counter that with John Mateer, overlooked, from Texas. The schools in Texas didn't really want him, goes to Washington State, balls out, whatever. So I'm just really curious. I do still think that comes down to defenses. I still think that comes down to, I still think that game comes down to two teams that were actually really good on defense last year. The offenses were just so bad that, they didn't have the win-loss records that they wanted. So that's the obvious one. That's the game that I'm most intrigued by, to say the least, going into this weekend.
So I don't know if you saw the press conference, but the announcement of the exhibition with Arkansas and Memphis, at all benefiting St. Jude at FedEx Forum in October. They're even talking about, I think they're going to end up doing a home and home. But it was that Memphis has rolled out the red carpet for John Calipari, and they're celebrating what he meant to that university for all those years. So, time can heal all wounds, I guess maybe in 90% of relationships, huh?
No, I'm actually glad you brought that up because, I'll tell you, obviously being a little bit of a, Calipari historian, I mean, people forget, I wrote a book about Calipari's first team at, Kentucky, and that breakup, first of all, I'll be quick. If I'm going long, cut me off. But, one, I think the decision to leave Memphis was actually a much, I don't think I think you could count on one hand the number of jobs that John Calipari would have left Memphis for because he had them operating at the highest level. But it was very contentious. The city was hurt. People forget this. And I think it was 2016 or 2017. Kentucky played UCLA in the Sweet 16. It was the year UCLA had Lonzo Ball. And the game was in Memphis, and he got booed. It was very contentious. There was a talk at some point of either a statue or honoring one of his teams, and they actually had to cancel it because there was so much fan backlash. So I don't know if it's just now that he's moved on from Kentucky, if it's older, if it's whatever, if he's been humbled a little bit. I was so happy to see that, though. I thought the Hogs Plus website put out a great social media clip where, he's going around town and hugging fans and seeing people. I just thought it was really great, and I'm so glad you brought that up because, as you said, Phil, it does feel like time has healed all wounds.
Aaron, enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll look forward to talking Arkansas Ole Miss next weekend, okay?
Oh, my goodness. I didn't even mention that one. We're getting there, boys. We're getting there. I'm excited. Talk to you guys next week. And I'll just say this, beat Arkansas State, okay? I don't need that negativity in my life of losing Arkansas State in Little Rock. So for the A-State fans listening, I apologize, but Hogs take care of business this weekend, and I think they will for sure.
You don't always win your first bet. That's why MyBookie has you covered. Use our code HOGS, H-O-G-S, and your first bet up to $500 is fully covered. If your pick doesn't hit, you get it right back with our Bet Back bonus. Go to mybookie.ag and use the code HOGS to claim your Bet Back bonus. MyBookie's where bettors win together because bragging's good, but cashing in is better. And your first bet is fully covered. Use our code HOGS.
Got a little jingle